Hello, my dear. My name is Maya. Tonight, I'll read a little cheeky story about a city that never sleeps, an encounter and new beginnings. So lay down, close your eyes and come with me. You'll be safe here, let your body relax. Drift with me to a magical encounter. Rain lashed against the windows of a charming bakery nestled on Bleecker Street. Neon signs blurred, their colors bleeding into the wet pavement. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of vanilla and yeast, a comforting contrast to the stormy night. Emma, the owner, hummed along to Billie Holiday, her hands expertly kneading dough. The bell above the door chimed, announcing a customer. Emma glanced up, a dusting of flour on her nose. A man, tall and handsome, stood dripping on the welcome mat. His trench coat shimmered under the warm light, his smile as disarming as the scent of cinnamon in the air. "Evening," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Well, hello there," Emma replied, wiping her hands on her apron. She couldn't help but notice the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He had the kind of face that made you want to lean in and whisper secrets. "What can I tempt you with on this dreary night?" "Something warm," he said, stepping closer, his gaze sweeping over the display case. "And sweet." His eyes met hers. There was a flicker of something playful. Emma felt a blush creep up her neck. Her fingers tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "Our cinnamon rolls are fresh out of the oven," she suggested, her voice a little breathless, guaranteed to chase away the chill. She moved to grab a pastry bag, her heart beating a little faster than usual. The man followed her movements, with his eyes, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Cinnamon rolls it is then," he said, his voice a low murmur. He shrugged off his coat, revealing a crisp white shirt clinging to his broad shoulders. Emma tried not to stare, but her eyes had a mind of their own. He caught her looking and winked, his smile widening. "Don't worry," he teased. "I don't bite much." Emma laughed, a little flustered. She plated the cinnamon rolls, her fingers lingering on the warm porcelain. Why did she react this way? "Coffee?" she asked, her voice regaining its usual confidence. "Or perhaps something a little stronger?" She glanced at him from under her lashes, a playful challenge in her eyes. "Coffee will be perfect," he replied, his gaze never leaving hers, black as night. He leaned against the counter. His presence was filling the small space of the bakery. Emma turned to prepare his coffee, acutely aware of his eyes on her back. The air crackled with unspoken possibilities. Emma placed the coffee and cinnamon rolls on a small table by the window. The rain had softened to a gentle drizzle, the streetlights painting the wet pavement in shimmering gold. The man followed her, his movements fluid and graceful. He pulled out a chair for her, a gesture both unexpected and charming. "You shouldn't," she said, her cheeks warm, but she sat down nonetheless, her heart doing a little flip-flop in her chest. He took the seat opposite her, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "So," he began, taking a bite of his cinnamon roll. "Emma, is it? How did you know?" she asked, surprised. He simply smiled, a hint of mischief playing on his lips. "The name tag," he said, nodding towards her apron. "Emma." He repeated her name softly, savoring the way it sounded on his tongue. Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. They talked for what felt like hours, the cinnamon rolls long forgotten. He told her his name was Ethan, and he was a writer, new to the city. She told him about her dreams of opening a chain of bakeries, of sharing her love for all things sweet with the world. He listened with genuine interest, his eyes never leaving her face. Ethan reached across the table, his fingers brushing against hers as he picked up his coffee cup. Emma's breath hitched in her throat. "You have flour on your cheek," he said, his voice husky. He raised his hand, his thumb gently wiping the flour away. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. The air between them crackled with a sudden, undeniable tension. She held his gaze, lost in the warmth of his eyes. The bakery, the rain, the city outside. It all faded away, leaving only the two of them, caught in a moment of unexpected intimacy. Ethan leaned closer, his fingers lingering on her cheek a moment longer than necessary. Emma's breath caught in her throat, her senses alight, the scent of cinnamon and yeast, the warmth of his hand on her skin, the low rumble of his voice. It was intoxicating. She found herself leaning in, drawn to him like a moth to a flame. "You have the most beautiful eyes," he whispered, his voice a caress. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had never felt so seen, so desired. His gaze dropped to her lips, and for a moment, she thought he might kiss her. The ringing of the bell above the door shattered the moment. They both pulled back, startled. A young couple, giggling and oblivious to the charged atmosphere, entered the bakery. Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing pulse. "I should go," Ethan said, his voice laced with regret. He stood up, his gaze lingering on hers. "But I'd love to see you again." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a card, scribbling something on the back. "Call me," he said, pressing the card into her hand. Emma watched him go, her fingers curled around the card. She could still feel the warmth of his touch on her skin, the memory of his nearness, making her head spin. She glanced down at the card, a slow smile spreading across her face. He had written his phone number and a single word. "Tomorrow?" The bell above the door chimed again, signaling Ethan's departure. Emma took a deep breath, the scent of cinnamon and possibility filling her senses. She glanced at the clock, then back at the oven, where a fresh batch of cookies was baking. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. Section 8. A Taste of Heaven, a Nightcap for Two. The next evening, Ethan returned to Sugar and Spice. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and sparkling. He found Emma behind the counter, her hair pulled back in a loose braid, a smudge of flour on her nose. She looked even more beautiful than he remembered. "You came," she said, her eyes lighting up at the sight of him. "I wasn't sure you would." She tried to sound nonchalant, but her voice betrayed her nervousness. Ethan smiled, his heart warming at her obvious pleasure. "Wouldn't miss it," he replied, his gaze holding hers. He gestured towards the display case. "What's good tonight?" Emma laughed, her nervousness melting away under his easy charm. "Everything is good tonight," she said, her voice filled with a newfound confidence, "especially with you here." Rain-soaked streets and lingering glances. They spent the evening talking and laughing, sharing stories and stolen glances. Ethan discovered that Emma had a weakness for dark chocolate and old movies. Emma learned that Ethan had a talent for making her laugh. As the bakery emptied and the city outside quieted, they found themselves reluctant to say goodnight. "Walk me home?" Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "It would be my pleasure," he replied, offering her his arm. They strolled hand in hand through the quiet streets, the air alive with the scent of rain and possibility. The city lights twinkled around them, casting a warm glow on their faces. With each shared laugh, each stolen glance, each accidental touch, their connection deepened. Section 10. Sweet Dreams and the Promise of Tomorrow. They reached Emma's apartment building, a charming brownstone with a wrought iron gate. Ethan turned to face her, his hands resting on her shoulders. "I had a wonderful time," he said, his voice sincere. "The best time." "Me too," Emma replied, her cheeks flushed. She stood on tiptoe, her lips brushing against his cheek in a feather-light kiss. "Good night, Ethan." Ethan watched her disappear inside, a slow smile spreading across his face. He turned and walked away, his steps lighter than air. He couldn't remember the last time he had felt so alive, so hopeful. He couldn't wait to see where this new adventure would lead. Good night, my dearest. Sleep tight. And so, as the city that never sleeps finally drifted off into slumber, Emma and Ethan, each lost in their own thoughts of flower-dusted aprons, stolen kisses, and the promise of tomorrow, drifted off to sleep. Good night, sleep well, my dearest. It's time to let go of the day and glide in to the night. You are safe, and may your dreams be filled with the sweet scent of cinnamon and the warmth of newfound love.